Hello, I'm Jasmine Doust from Samos Volunteers. I'm one of the board members and one of the co-founders and helped establish the Samos Legal Centre a couple of years ago now, which has been supported by both MRA Refugee-Action and Samos Volunteers. I'm just going to give you a little overview of the situation on Samos at the moment, the changes in EU laws and policies that have been implemented relatively recently, and the impact on asylum seekers' ability to come to the UK now that the Brexit transition period is over. But mostly we're looking at the work of the Samos Legal Centre, what's been achieved in the last couple of years, what the sort of difficulties have arisen due to COVID, and the plans for the next year. So briefly then, there's around 3,300 refugees and asylum seekers residing on Samos at the moment, the main populations being about a third from Syria, 23% from Afghanistan and 14% from the Congo. There have been very few arrivals from Turkey over the last months due to the decrease in the general global migration, people being prevented from crossing international borders, but also moving internally within countries. Since the 1st of January 2021, both adults and children seeking asylum in Europe are now far less likely to be able to be reunited with their family in the UK. As the Brexit transition period came to an end on the 31st of December, the Dublin III regulation, which was a vital legal route for family reunification, was also closed, and this can no longer be relied upon. In the UK, the Dublin III provisions were not really well known even to immigration lawyers, and given the UK's geographical location, Dublin III was most commonly actually utilised to push people back to where their fingerprints were taken, for example in Greece, as opposed to actually forwards to family reunification. In Greece, people would dream really of becoming or being considered a Dublin case, as reception conditions for people seeking protection in Greece were and still remain pretty dire, and arguably, and in some cases have been found to amount to inhuman and degrading treatment. Without the Dublin III provisions anymore, lawyers on Samos and the other islands and other areas of Greece are limited in their ability to reunify families within the UK, and instead need to utilise quite complicated and narrow provisions under the immigration rules. But luckily elsewhere in Europe, reunification provisions are still available, and this makes up actually quite a large part of the work that is carried out in the Samos Legal Centre. So the Samos Legal Centre is run by Advocates Sans Frontières and the Refugee Law Clinic Berlin, and they provide legal advice and support in the asylum procedures through the provision of information about asylum seekers' rights, interview preparation and support in the application process, support for cases before the appeals committee, so where an application has been refused, and information and awareness raising workshops. They also work alongside, obviously, a lot of people in very vulnerable situations through the identification and referrals of people to other organisations, for example, the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, submitting requests for interim measures to the European Court of Human Rights, and specific support to the LGBTQI plus community. Obviously, COVID has been impacting everyone all over the world, but luckily Samos has had relatively few cases in comparison. But from March to July 2020, the Samos Legal Centre closed, and the two organisations didn't have any volunteers coming over to Samos due to travel and safety restrictions. However, they did continue work remotely, and consultations were set up virtually so that the residents of the camp could continue to access crucial advice and legal representation. From July onwards, the centre did safely reopen with hygiene procedures in place, but with, of course, a significantly reduced capacity. Luckily at the time, the Samos Volunteers Alpha Centre was available, because that had to remain closed because in Greece schools and community centres were forced to close by law. And so the legal centre team were able to use the Alpha space to ensure that people could still access the legal help that they needed. Samos volunteers, meanwhile, were able to establish an online teaching programme and have been supporting self-organised schools within the camp. Both Advocates Sans Frontières and Refugee Law Clinic are continuing their work on Samos during 2021 as things are gradually going back to normal, with lawyers and legal volunteers coming over to the island to support the project. The teams are in the process of considering whether a bigger space will be a plausible move at some point this year to further increase accessibility to legal aid. They're looking at either going for an entirely new, bigger building or renting a second building just to increase capacity, really. The plans are currently still in their infancy, and we're waiting really to see when the new camp in Samos will open and how accessible it will be for people, as it's located about 15 minutes from the town by car. MRA Refugee-Action support is, of course, very important still, particularly in this period of time where the world is concentrating so much on the pandemic. Meanwhile, asylum interviews are continuing, and people do need advice to ensure that they have a fair chance in presenting their case. If you have any questions, feel free to just drop me a message at any time. Otherwise, thank you for your ongoing support, and I hope to see you all soon. Thanks.